Laughter in the dark. The village of Whispering Pines was nestled deep within the shadow of ancient woods, far from the reach of the modern world. Surrounded by towering trees whose gnarled branches seemed to whisper secrets in the wind, it was a place that time had forgotten. The village's charm lay in its simplicity. Life moved slowly, and the villagers cherished their peaceful existence. However, as the days grew shorter and the nights longer, an unsettling presence began to make itself known. It started subtly, with an inexplicable chill in the air as dusk fell. The villagers shrugged it off as the encroaching autumn, but there was a sense of unease that couldn't be shaken. The woods that had once been a source of comfort now felt oppressive, their dark depths concealing something sinister. It was on one particularly cold and moonless night that the first sound of laughter was heard. The Mrs. Wren, a widow who lived at the edge of the village, was the first to report the eerie phenomenon. She had been tending to her dying fire when the sound drifted through her window, a low, malevolent chuckle that sent shivers down her spine. It seemed to come from the forest, growing louder and more menacing with each passing second. She bolted her doors and windows, trying to shut out the haunting sound, but it seeped through the walls, echoing in her ears long after it had ceased. The next morning, Mrs. Wren recounted her experience to the villagers, but they dismissed it as the product of an overactive imagination or the howling of the wind. Yet, as the nights passed, more and more villagers reported hearing the same disturbing laughter. It became a nightly occurrence, its tone growing more sinister and mocking. The once tranquil nights were now filled with a sense of dread, and the laughter seemed to taunt them, as if reveling in their fear. Old Tom, the village blacksmith, was a man not easily rattled. With arms like iron and a heart of steel, he had faced many perils in his time, but even he could not deny the terror that gripped him when the laughter reached his ears. It was unlike any sound he had ever heard, a guttural, inhuman cackle that seemed to vibrate through his very bones. He stayed awake, hammer in hand, ready to confront whatever horror lurked in the darkness, but nothing ever came. Rumors began to spread like wildfire. Some said it was the ghost of a long-dead jester, cursed to wander the earth and torment the living. Others believed it to be a malevolent spirit, drawn to the village by some ancient evil. The village elder, Mr. Hobbes, spoke of an old legend passed down through generations, a tale of a wicked being that thrived on fear, its laughter a harbinger of doom. The villagers, desperate for answers, clung to these stories, their imaginations running wild. Despite their growing fear, life in Whispering Pines continued. The villagers tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the laughter was always there, lurking in the shadows, a constant reminder of the unseen menace that plagued them. Sleep became a luxury few could afford, and the once vibrant village now seemed shrouded in a perpetual fog of anxiety and exhaustion. The village children, once full of laughter and mischief, now played in silence, their eyes wide with fear. Parents kept them close, unwilling to let them wander too far from home. The fields, once tended with care, were now overgrown and neglected as the villagers spent their nights huddled in their homes, praying for the laughter to stop. But it never did. One fateful night, the laughter reached a crescendo. It was louder and more insidious than ever before, reverberating through the village with a malevolent glee. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, enveloping the village in a suffocating cloak of terror. The villagers, driven to the brink of madness, gathered in the town square, seeking solace in numbers. They stood together, eyes wide with fear, hearts pounding in their chests, as the laughter grew louder, more oppressive, filling their minds with a singular, unshakable thought: something wicked had come to Whispering Pines, and it was not leaving anytime soon. The following morning, the village was eerily silent. The laughter had finally ceased, but it left behind an atmosphere thick with dread and uncertainty. The villagers, bleary-eyed and weary, gathered in the square to discuss their next steps. It was clear that something had to be done, but no one knew exactly what. They looked to Mr. Hobbes, the village elder, for guidance. Mr. Hobbes stood at the center of the circle, his face lined with worry. He was an old man, but his mind was still sharp. He had seen many things in his lifetime, but nothing like this. Clearing his throat, he addressed the crowd. "We must seek the source of this evil," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "We cannot allow it to continue haunting us. I will need volunteers to come with me into the forest tonight. We must find out what is causing this and put an end to it." There was a murmur of fear and uncertainty among the villagers. The forest was a place of mystery and danger, especially at night. But they knew Mr. Hobbes was right, something had to be done. Slowly, a few brave souls stepped forward: old Tom, the blacksmith Sarah, the baker's daughter, whose courage was renowned, and young Edward, who had recently returned from the city and was eager to prove himself. As night fell, the small group gathered at the edge of the forest. Each carried a lantern and a weapon, though they were unsure what good these would do against an unseen foe. With Mr. Hobbes leading the way, they ventured into the dark woods, the light of their lanterns casting eerie shadows on the twisted trees. The forest was deathly silent, the usual sounds of nocturnal creatures conspicuously absent. The group moved cautiously, every crack of a twig underfoot making them jump. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and an oppressive feeling of dread settled over them. It was as if the forest itself was watching them, waiting for something. After what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing. In the center stood an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches stretching out like skeletal arms. At its base was a stone altar covered in moss and vines. The sight sent a chill down their spines. Mr. Hobbes approached the altar, his lantern held high. "This must be the place," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "There's something here, something that doesn't belong." As if in response to his words, a low, guttural laugh echoed through the clearing. It was the same laughter that had haunted the village, but this time it was much closer, more tangible. The group huddled together, their lanterns casting a faint glow in the darkness. Suddenly, the ground beneath the altar began to tremble. The vines and moss seemed to writhe and twist, as if alive. A figure began to emerge from the shadows, a twisted, spectral form that seemed to be made of darkness itself. It had no discernible features, but its presence was undeniably malevolent. The laughter grew louder, filling their minds with a crushing sense of despair. Old Tom stepped forward, his hammer raised. "Whatever you are, we'll stop you," he shouted, though his voice wavered. The figure's laughter intensified, a mocking sound that seemed to reverberate through the very air. It moved towards them, a swirling mass of darkness, its presence suffocating. Sarah and Edward stepped back, their faces pale with fear. Mr. Hobbes, however, stood his ground, his eyes fixed on the figure. "Leave this place," he commanded, his voice firm. "You have no power here." The figure paused, as if considering his words. Then, with a sudden, swift movement, it lunged at them. The group scattered, their lanterns flickering wildly as they tried to avoid its grasp. The figure's laughter was deafening now, a cacophony of madness that seemed to come from all directions. In the chaos, Mr. Hobbes noticed something. The stone altar was glowing faintly. He realized that it was the source of the figure's power. Gathering his courage, he shouted to the others, "The altar. We need to destroy it." Old Tom and Edward rushed to the altar, using their tools to break the stone. The figure howled in rage, its form becoming more unstable. With a final, desperate effort, they shattered the altar, the stone crumbling to dust. The figure let out a piercing scream, its form disintegrating into the darkness. The laughter ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. The group stood panting, their hearts racing, but the oppressive feeling had lifted. The forest seemed to breathe again, the normal sounds of the night returning. They made their way back to the village, the weight of their ordeal heavy on their shoulders. The villagers greeted them with relief, though the fear in their eyes remained. They had stopped the immediate threat, but the memory of the laughter and the dark figure would haunt them for a long time. Whispering Pines began to slowly return to normal, but the villagers knew they would never forget the nights of terror. They kept a watchful eye on the forest, wary of any signs that the evil might return. And as the nights grew darker and colder, they huddled together, finding comfort in each other's presence, and hoping that the laughter would never come again. Weeks passed, and the village of Whispering Pines slowly regained a semblance of its former tranquility. The laughter had ceased, and the villagers hoped the nightmare was over. However, the shadow of fear still loomed large, and whispers of the dark presence continued to haunt their conversations. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching them from the depths of the forest. Mr. Hobbes and the others who had faced the dark figure were celebrated as heroes, but they, too, felt an unease that they couldn't quite articulate. The broken stone altar had been a focal point of evil, but had they truly vanquished it? They went about their daily lives, always vigilant, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. One moonless night, the village was plunged into an oppressive silence. It was the kind of quiet that made even the wind seem hushed, as if the very air was holding its breath. The villagers, uneasy, locked their doors and windows, hoping to keep the darkness at bay. But the silence was soon broken by a familiar, spine-chilling sound. The malevolent laughter had returned, more insidious and mocking than ever before. In his small cottage at the edge of the village, Mr. Hobbes awoke with a start. The laughter seemed to echo within his very soul, a cruel reminder of their ordeal in the forest. He quickly dressed and made his way to the town square, where a crowd of fearful villagers had already gathered, their faces pale in the lantern light. Old Tom, Sarah, and Edward were among them, their expressions a mixture of anger and fear. "We destroyed the altar," Tom said, his voice tense. "Why is this happening again?" Mr. Hobbes shook his head, his mind racing. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we need to act quickly. Whatever this is, it's not going to stop until we confront it once more." The group of villagers, bolstered by their resolve, set out for the forest once again. This time, more people joined them, armed with lanterns, torches, and makeshift weapons. They would face this darkness together, united in their determination to reclaim their peace. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, and the oppressive feeling of dread returned. The laughter seemed to follow them, a disembodied sound that grew louder with every step. It was as if the forest itself was mocking their efforts, daring them to find the source of their torment. They reached the clearing with the ancient oak tree and the shattered remains of the stone altar. The atmosphere was charged with a palpable sense of malevolence. The villagers spread out, searching for any signs of the dark figure or clues to its origin. Mr. Hobbes approached the altar, examining the ground around it. Suddenly, the earth trembled, and a fissure opened where the altar had stood. From its depths emerged a swirling mass of shadows, taking the form of the dark figure they had encountered before. Its laughter filled the clearing, a cacophony of madness that threatened to overwhelm their senses. "We have to destroy it once and for all, Mr. Hobbes shouted over the din. "There must be something we're missing." Sarah, whose sharp eyes had always been a boon to the village, noticed a strange symbol etched into the roots of the ancient oak tree. Here she called out, pointing to the mark. "This must be connected to the figure." Old Tom and Edward joined her, and with their tools, they began to hack at the roots, trying to sever the connection. The figure howled in rage, its form becoming more unstable as they worked. The villagers could feel the ground shaking beneath them, the very forest resisting their efforts. With a final, determined strike, they broke through the roots, severing the symbol. The dark figure let out a blood-curdling scream, its form disintegrating into a cloud of shadow that dissipated into the night. The laughter ceased, replaced by a profound silence that felt almost serene. The villagers stood panting, their hearts racing. The oppressive feeling lifted, and the air seemed lighter, more breathable. They had done it. They had finally banished the evil that had haunted Whispering Pines. As they made their way back to the village, the first light of dawn began to break through the trees. The villagers were weary but relieved, their steps lighter with the knowledge that they had reclaimed their home. They knew that the darkness had been vanquished, but they also understood the need to remain vigilant. The forest held many secrets, and not all of them were vanquished by the light of day. Whispering Pines began to heal. The laughter that had once haunted their nights was now a distant memory, a cautionary tale to be told around firesides. The villagers rebuilt their lives, cherishing the peace they had fought so hard to secure. And as they moved forward, they carried with them a newfound strength, a bond forged in the fires of adversity, knowing that together they could face whatever darkness lay ahead. Months passed, and Whispering Pines flourished once more. The villagers resumed their daily routines, their laughter genuine and free from the taint of fear. Yet the memory of the sinister laughter and the malevolent presence lingered like a shadow in the back of their minds. They maintained their vigilance, knowing that evil often returns when least expected. Mr. Hobbes and the others who had faced the darkness in the forest were held in high regard. Their bravery had restored peace, but they remained watchful, ever alert for signs of the darkness returning. As the village celebrated the harvest festival, a sense of unease crept back into the hearts of the villagers. The nights were growing longer, and the forest seemed to whisper once more. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a dense fog rolled in from the woods. It was thicker than any fog the villagers had ever seen, an impenetrable wall of white that swallowed the light of their lanterns. As the village was engulfed in this eerie mist, a familiar, chilling sound began to echo through the streets. The malevolent laughter had returned, more sinister and mocking than ever before. The villagers, gripped by terror, gathered in the town square, their faces pale and their eyes wide with fear. The laughter seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a disembodied sound that filled the air with a sense of impending doom. Mr. Hobbes, old Tom, Sarah, and Edward quickly convened, determined to confront this evil once again. "We need to find the source, Mr. Hobbes said, his voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at him. "This time we need to ensure it is destroyed completely." The group, bolstered by the resolve of the villagers, set out into the forest once more. The dense fog made navigation difficult, and the oppressive silence was punctuated only by the intermittent, mocking laughter. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and the sense of dread became almost tangible. They reached the clearing with the ancient oak tree and the shattered remains of the stone altar. The ground where the fissure had opened was now sealed, but the air around it seemed charged with malevolence. The villagers spread out, searching for any signs of the dark figure or clues to its origin. As they examined the clearing, a low, guttural growl rumbled through the air. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike any they had seen before. It was a twisted, spectral form, larger and more terrifying than the dark figure they had previously encountered. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its laughter was a cacophony of madness and despair. The villagers stood frozen, their courage wavering in the face of this new horror. The creature moved towards them, its form shifting and writhing as it approached. Mr. Hobbes, his mind racing, realized that the creature was feeding off their fear, growing stronger with each passing moment. "We must stand together," he shouted, rallying the villagers. "Do not let it feed on your fear. We can defeat it if we remain united." Drawing strength from his words, the villagers formed a tight circle, their lanterns held high. The creature circled them, its laughter a relentless assault on their senses. Mr. Hobbes noticed that the ancient oak tree, with its severed roots, seemed to react to the creature's presence. The symbol etched into the roots glowed faintly, and he realized that the tree was somehow connected to the creature's power. "Focus on the tree," he called out. "We need to break its connection to the creature." Old Tom, Sarah, and Edward rushed to the tree, their tools ready. They hacked at the roots with renewed determination, the glow intensifying with each strike. The creature howled in rage, its form becoming more unstable as the connection weakened. The ground beneath the tree began to tremble, and the villagers struggled to maintain their footing. With a final, determined effort, they severed the last of the roots, and the glowing symbol faded to nothing. The creature let out a piercing scream, its form disintegrating into a cloud of shadow that dissipated into the night. The laughter ceased, replaced by a profound silence that felt almost serene. The fog began to lift, and the air grew warmer, the oppressive feeling lifting as the creature vanished. The villagers stood panting, their hearts racing, but the weight of their ordeal had finally been lifted. As they made their way back to the village, the first light of dawn began to break through the trees. The villagers were weary but relieved, their steps lighter with the knowledge that they had reclaimed their home once more. They knew that the darkness had been vanquished, but they also understood the need to remain vigilant. Whispering Pines began to heal again. The laughter that had once haunted their nights was now a distant memory, a cautionary tale to be told around firesides. The villagers rebuilt their lives, cherishing the peace they had fought so hard to secure. And as they moved forward, they carried with them a newfound strength, a bond forged in the fires of adversity, knowing that together they could face whatever darkness lay ahead. Life in Whispering Pines slowly returned to normal once again. The villagers, though scarred by their experiences, resumed their daily routines with a renewed sense of purpose and unity. They rebuilt what had been damaged, both physically and emotionally, and the bonds between them grew stronger. The memory of the sinister laughter and the malevolent presence was relegated to fireside tales, a reminder of the darkness they had overcome together. The village elder, Mr. Hobbes, often spoke of the courage and determination that had saved Whispering Pines. He reminded the villagers that vigilance was crucial, for evil often returns when least expected. The forest, with its ancient secrets, was now approached with both respect and caution. The once inviting woods were now a reminder of the lurking darkness, and the villagers kept a watchful eye on the tree line. One cold winter evening, as the first snow of the season began to fall, a sense of unease returned to Whispering Pines. The forest seemed to whisper again, its ancient trees swaying in the wind, casting long, eerie shadows across the village. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the very landscape was bracing itself for something ominous. As night fell, the villagers gathered in their homes, hoping the peace they had fought so hard to achieve would not be shattered. But just as they settled in for the night, the malevolent laughter returned, piercing the stillness with its chilling sound. It was louder, more mocking, and more insidious than ever before. The villagers, their hearts gripped by fear, knew they could not ignore it. They gathered in the town square, their faces pale and eyes wide with dread. Mr. Hobbes, Old Tom, Sarah, and Edward quickly convened, their determination unshaken despite the terror that gnawed at them. "We cannot let this evil take hold of our village again, Mr. Hobbes said, his voice resolute. "We need to find the true source and end it once and for all." The villagers, armed with lanterns, torches, and makeshift weapons, set out into the forest one final time. The dense fog that had returned made navigation difficult, and the oppressive silence was punctuated only by the intermittent, mocking laughter. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and the sense of dread became almost tangible. They reached the clearing with the ancient oak tree and the shattered remains of the stone altar. The ground where the fissure had opened was now sealed, but the air around it seemed charged with malevolence. The villagers spread out, searching for any signs of the dark figure or clues to its origin. As they examined the clearing, a low, guttural growl rumbled through the air. From the shadows emerged the dark figure, now larger and more terrifying than ever before. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its laughter was a cacophony of madness and despair. The villagers stood frozen, their courage wavering in the face of this new horror. The figure moved towards them, its form shifting and writhing as it approached. Mr. Hobbes, his mind racing, realized that the figure was feeding off their fear, growing stronger with each passing moment. "We must stand together," he shouted, rallying the villagers. "Do not let it feed on your fear. We can defeat it if we remain united." Drawing strength from his words, the villagers formed a tight circle, their lanterns held high. The figure circled them, its laughter a relentless assault on their senses. Mr. Hobbes noticed that the ancient oak tree, with its severed roots, seemed to react to the figure's presence. The symbol etched into the roots glowed faintly, and he realized that the tree was somehow connected to the figure's power. He focused on the tree, he called out. "We need to break its connection to the figure." Old Tom, Sarah, and Edward rushed to the tree, their tools ready. They hacked at the roots with renewed determination, the glow intensifying with each strike. The figure howled in rage, its form becoming more unstable as the connection weakened. The ground beneath the tree began to tremble, and the villagers struggled to maintain their footing. With a final, determined effort, they severed the last of the roots, and the glowing symbol faded to nothing. The figure let out a piercing scream, its form disintegrating into a cloud of shadow that dissipated into the night. The laughter ceased, replaced by a profound silence that felt almost serene. The fog began to lift, and the air grew warmer, the oppressive feeling lifting as the figure vanished. The villagers stood panting, their hearts racing, but the weight of their ordeal had finally been lifted. As they made their way back to the village, the first light of dawn began to break through the trees. The villagers were weary but relieved, their steps lighter with the knowledge that they had reclaimed their home once more. They knew that the darkness had been vanquished, but they also understood the need to remain vigilant. Whispering Pines began to heal again. The laughter that had once haunted their nights was now a distant memory, a cautionary tale to be told around firesides. The villagers rebuilt their lives, cherishing the peace they had fought so hard to secure. And as they moved forward, they carried with them a newfound strength, a bond forged in the fires of adversity, knowing that together they could face whatever darkness lay ahead.